So hello everyone, and after over 90 how good videos I counted, we're going back to the very first question that I ever asked in any how good video. How good is Taylor Ashley? Yes, we've come first all the way around full circle, because this was the first video that I ever made on how good, and we're coming back to it right now. Isn't that amazing? Sadly not on the same server that I had this video on back then, but you know, things change. So we have Ashuri Taylor, or Ashley Taylor, with her two memoria that are all quite changed. So in case you've been wondering, yeah, it's just going to be the same from North America. Maybe you're just coming to this video thinking, oh, I'm just going to look at the spirit enhancement because nothing else has changed, right? Wrong. Everything has changed about her. I wouldn't say she's very different, but she has some noticeable differences that are quite important. However, the most important part about her, which is that she's a Blast Gorilla, Blast Gorilla and Blast Godzilla, I guess. Yeah, still here, so figured that she's still that, and of course Japanese people are like, oh my god, what, four Blasts? Oh my god, four Blasts, that's amazing, oh my god, four Blasts, wow. And in case you have seen her from the North American version, you might also recognize her personal memoria being absolutely terrible. It's no longer terrible, it's actually great. Yeah, this right here is the old North American personal. Okay, sure, who cares about this? But then you have this, and it's like, this is the Japanese one. Attack up 25% for 3 turns, damage increase 25% for 3 turns. Hey, that's really good. That's actually really good. It kind of is like both of the offensive aspects from the Yachio Flower Memoria and the Iroha Flower Memoria rolled into one. And when I have a super powerful attacker, or just like any high attack character that I want to have dealing damage on my team, I will put both Iroha and Yachio Flower Memo on them. Like, even after all this time, even after like almost 4 years, like 3.5 years of playing this game, those two that were in at release, still in my opinion, the best offensive Memoria in the game, because they last for 3 turns, and they are super defensive as well. Of course, you're not having the defensive aspect if you just play this instead, but you can just throw both of these into one slot, basically, now with this, and it lasts for 3 turns. Hey, that's pretty good. Yeah. So, but yeah, like I said, in case you run those Flower Memoria instead, those have the defensive aspects on there. But does that matter? Does that matter not having the offensive aspects on there when you're playing something like Ashuri Taylor, who just blasts everything to death anyway? And that's kind of the theme that we're gonna see throughout this entire rest of this how good video. That she's just all about blasting, and so she doesn't care about basically anything else. But even despite that, she has some cool little things here and there that actually make her interesting in a bunch of other aspects. So next up, her stats. Her stats are buffed way more. She has like a bunch more thousands of HP, like over 1,000 more attack, like over 2,000 more defense or something. Like, she actually has way more stats than she has on the North American version, which means that Homoda is even sadder than she was before. She has, with SE now, pretty decent amount of HP and a pretty decent amount of defense. Of course, it's far from tank, right? Far from any balanced type would be tanky, but for someone who's so incredibly offensive, who's an attack type with 12,600 attack, that's some respectable defensive stat line. That's some pretty respectable defenses for someone who is such an aggressive attacker. So yeah, she's far from a tank, but she can take a few hits, and that's very important to know if you're playing against Ashley, that even though you might think to yourself, yeah, she's a glass cannon, nope, she's just a cannon, and cannons are made of metal and steel, German Kruppstahl, and so she doesn't die that fast. Actually, she's American, but you know, I don't get to talk about like Western characters that often, so I gotta mix it in somewhere. Next up, for Connect. Yeah, Connect is different as well. You can already see, by the way, in case you're peeking the Magi already, yes, that's some very different stuff down there. If you're looking at the Connect, you still have the blast damage up, we still have the attack up. Instead of the Dazzle, we have Charm. Is that better or is that worse? In my opinion, that's worse, because I just like having Dazzle for increased damage against a weak element, which is nice, and if you're using this in PvP for some reason, we're going to see later why I say for some reason, then yeah, probably also would be better to have a Dazzle. In PvE as well, sometimes you just want enemies to miss attacks, because if the enemy is like 3 magical girls, okay, on EX 100 evils, and you only charm 2 of them because the other one, either you couldn't hit them or because they just resisted or whatever, then it kind of sucks, and they still get 3 discs, and you basically didn't do anything except for taking out some of the active abilities that the opponents might have used that are now charmed. So there are some uses of charms, but there are also some cases where charm doesn't do that much. There are some uses for Dazzle, but there are also some cases where Dazzle doesn't do that much, like for example opponents still getting all of their actives off. So yeah, it's kind of hard to tell which of these is better, but personally I like having Dazzle more. So in my opinion, it's a little bit less good for what I like to do, but maybe you're someone who plays a different playstyle. Maybe you play something like Kanoko or Mami, you play some bind charm setups, and Ashley would fit well into that. So yeah, that helps quite a lot. Moving on though, Magia. So the Magia actually becomes kind of important because we're going to see later that she actually has a chance of getting to Magia, just a chance, but yeah, she could actually get to Magia. And what we see right here is this is basically everything is different. Like, yeah, it damages all the enemies still. That's the only thing that's the same, but who cares about that? That's not the important part. On NA, it dazzled and poisoned for 2 turns, and the double did that all for 3 turns. Now the dazzle for 3 turns is actually kind of insane, but on NA, you weren't getting off her Magia or her doppel ever. It just wasn't going to happen unless you're like making a video for YouTube showing off the doppel. But apart from that, it wasn't going to happen. So the dazzle, sure, it was fine, but apart from that, okay, it also doesn't only poison, and poison isn't that great. So apart from that, it also didn't really do that much. So not only was it really hard to get to Magia, it only had really one good effect on it, but that one good effect was pretty good. Now though, on JP, it charms all enemies. Hey, charm all enemies, that makes it a lot more likely to actually hit all enemies with this, and that's pretty good. To get a free turn, which of course the double does as well, you give blast damage up to yourself for 3 turns, 60%, and ignore damage cut on yourself for 3 turns as well. That's pretty darn good to have on an attacker. And guess what, on the double, blast damage up goes to all allies instead for 65%, which is also, I think, what Kazumi has. Although Kazumi has a way easy time to get to a double because she generates MP return. And you have damage cut is now 5 turns instead of 3 turns. And on top of that, blast MP gain up self 3 turns 5 MP, which together with the SC becomes 10 MP. Oh my god, you actually get quite a lot of blast MP from that if you get to double. Wow, that's great. Tard has the same. Final Tard, I mean. Final Tard also has this, by the way. So Final Tard also has it on Magia, by the way. Like, Final Tard is both on Magia and on double to get blast MP to self. And I will talk about that later because there's some cool strategies you can do for that. But I need to really talk about the Spirit Enhancement for now, and then later I'll talk about the cool stuff you can do with all of this. But keep in mind that this is not actually relevant. Like, this is a really good double actually for a blaster, and maybe you will actually use this a bunch. Looking up here though at the Spirit Enhancement, we have the double damage and the MP gain up, which is mostly useless. The thing about MP gain up is, you might think to yourself, oh, I guess when I get over 100, my blast salutation, my blast MP is gonna give me a lot more MP. No, blast MP gain is not influenced by MP up or MP down. There's no way of influencing this other than just having more of it. So this doesn't actually do anything with your blast MP gain. That's sadly. But based on the flip side, if the enemy somehow gave you like a really big MP gain down, you'd still be blasting to MP. That is pretty good. So what do we actually have? We have anti-debuff 2 stacks, which is cool. I'll talk about that in a bit. Like I need to actually talk about all the stuff right here though, and then I'm gonna give you guys the laydown, the smackdown of all the stuff that you can do with a cool kid. She has evade, anti-evade, and stuff that she just gets for being an attack type. A critical hit, yeah, she's an attack type, she gets those things. She is immune to bind. Hey, that's really cool. Bind is something that you might see sometimes as a powerful effect that's supposed to disrupt your team, but guess what? We're immune, so we don't care. That's pretty great. What else is there? Oh yeah, there's this thing right here. Blast damage up 7 for 40% and damage cut 3 for 15% when a battle starts for 5 turns, which is also active in PvP. That's pretty darn good. Now, I know I've said before there's a 70%. Why? Because it's a temporary effect. Now, temporary and temporary and permanent effects usually use a different scaling. If you have something like a connect is a temporary effect, so temporary 7, Roman 7 means 70%. So I can say, okay, temporary effect 7 means 70%. Instead, they went with the scaling for permanent effect, because on permanent effect, if you have like a passive, like a blue icon Memoria that gives blast damage up, and that one had blast damage up 7 on it, that would be 40%. So they went with the permanent scaling for blast damage up, even though it's a temporary effect. Dude, Roman numerals and scaling or whatever the game does, like, nothing makes sense. Nothing makes sense. If you think there's a rule to it, there's no rule to it whatsoever unless you actually see the numbers. We have the numbers, they're 40% instead of 70%, yeah. But it's still pretty good. Keep in mind though, this is the only blast damage up bonus that she has. She has no other blast damage up, meaning that after 5 turns, you have no blast up. 0% of it. That's somehow even less than other characters that have basically no blast up, like Homura, for example, also has like no blast damage up, and she has even less than that after 5 turns, which basically means you're doing pretty well for 5 turns. For those 5 turns, you have some of the highest blast damage up there, not quite as high as some others actually. I think regular Tard is like 50% passive blast damage up, like maybe even 60%, like a ridiculous amount of passive blast damage up. She has 40% for 5 turns. I mean, it's still quite a lot. Yosu has 33% passive. And then, of course, on top of that, you have to Broken Personal. So yeah, this is actually not quite broken. It's because not as much as I thought it was going to be, but still, that's a lot of blast damage up to half of 5 turns. And usually, if you're playing Ashley, you want to win in 5 turns anyway, so I guess it's fine. And then you have active, anti-evade, anti-provoke. Huh. Interesting. In most cases, this won't do that much, but let's actually talk about all this stuff. Okay, let's lay the smack down. What is Ashley gonna do? First off, she's gonna farm really fast. She's gonna farm really fast. If you put her on your all slot, which is what most people are gonna do, if you have her, put her on all slot, even if you just 2 slot, put her on your all slot, because people who want to just farm stuff really fast, who want to farm quests for maybe events, maybe for drops that they want, maybe because they just want to beat main story or whatever, and they just want to do it fast. Put Ashley on all slot. If you have an Ashley yourself, even if she's just 1 slot, okay, you use her herself, and if you have 2 Ashleys, you can farm super duper fast. Even if you just have the 1 Ashley from your support, you're farming way faster. Enemy waves just die, just keel over really fast, and it's gonna be great. It's gonna be great, really easy doing all of that stuff, and that's like the best thing that Ashley can do. She's going to be the #1 choice for the all support slot, and everyone will want to have one of her if they farm anything. Unless for some reason you're farming like super high challenge level and you don't have good characters yourself and you require a support to carry you through challenge quests, then maybe Ashley is not the best choice. If you're doing EX challenge quests, once again, if you need a support to carry you through EX, maybe Ashley isn't the best choice. Maybe take something like a Madokami who can get to Magia passively and then just Magia's enemies down by buffing your team and stuff like that. Might be a better choice in that case. But for the most part, Ashley will be the #1 choice for all slots, so yeah, that's going to be great. And that by itself is already enough for most people to want to pull her. If for some reason being the best choice in the entire game for the all slot is not good enough reason for you to pull her, there's a bunch of other stuff that you can do. Next up, I wanted to talk about the Blast MP and the Blast MP she gains from her doppel. Now, something that Final Tart could do is if you, for some reason, let's say, for example, there is a Kimochi, and that Kimochi is forest type or whatever, and you don't have a good fire type, or the only good fire types you have are free to play, or you have like a 1-slot Ryoko, those aren't good enough. You're not going to get good damage out with those. What you can just do is you can just say, you know what, screw trying to get a really high damage out there, like trying to get into like the top 5,000 or whatever, top 3,000, top 2,000 of all people in the world. It's not gonna happen. But I just want to get all the rewards from the Kimochi. I want to get into the highest Kimochi rank that you can. Like I think rank SS or whatever. I think it's like the highest Kimochi rank, and that's like only the top 10,000 or whatever. So it's not even that hard to get in there. Even if you don't do that much damage, it's pretty easy to get in there. But what you can do is if you don't have those specific characters for that Kimochi, what you can probably just do is you play solo Ashley or solo Final Tart. In fact, some people did that. Some people just played solo Final Tart on Water Kimochi, for example, because they just didn't have any good forest character. So if you play solo Final Tart on that Kimochi, for example, what you do is you keep blasting yourself to, in that case, Magia or Doppel, and once you get out of that Magia or Doppel, because Final Tart has it on Magia as well, actually doesn't, you get a bunch of more MP blast from that Magia, which then means you can keep chaining Magia and keep chaining Doppels, and if you get to Doppel has like 5 blast MP on it, and in total that would be 10 blast MP, so you would do Doppel, 2 blast discs. If all of those hit all 3 tiles, which I assume you would be able to, depending on the Kimochi tiles, and then do another 3 blast discs the next turn, you would get exactly back to Doppel. So you could do Doppel blast blast next turn, triple blast, and then Doppel blast blast again, so you could keep chaining that one after another, and that would deal a significant amount of damage, even against Kimochi of a different element. So yeah, that's like the low effort. That's really low effort, and it's almost guaranteed to get you into the highest like reward tier for Kimochi, so you can like get like all of the Kimochi rewards that you could ever want by doing that. And actually Taylor can do the same. You just have to get to Doppel first instead of going to Magia and then already starting that. But yeah, once you get to Doppel, you can do the exact same thing. Doppel blast blast, then triple blast again, and then Doppel blast blast, keep doing that, and you can farm some Kimochi damage. You're not gonna get into like the top few thousands, but you're gonna get all of the rewards probably from the Kimochi, so yeah. So she's like the I don't want to say free-to-play choice, but she's like the low-effort, I just want to get all the stuff choice for Kimochi, together with Final Tart. So yeah, that's really good. Apart from that though, there's probably not too much of a reason to try and get her to Magia and Doppel too much. Like, yeah, it's actually pretty good to get her to Doppel if you're playing a Blast team, but Blast MP just isn't enough, especially because Ashley Taylor wants to win the battle in 5 turns or she loses her buffs. And not just that, she just wants to win fast anyway, because that's just what you would play her for. If you're playing a longer term, like if you play a team that wants to fight for longer than 5 turns, just use Magia characters, right? Why would you take a Blast team into a battle that you know lasts longer than 5 turns? Just play an Excel team. But yeah, in case somehow, if for some reason you don't have any good Excel characters, not even free-to-play ones, but you have Ashley Taylor, maybe like some other Blast characters, and yeah, I guess maybe you can take them to longer quests as well, and then actually you do get to Magia or Doppel, and then chuck those out as well. More importantly though, I want to talk about something else. It's kind of interesting. Mirrors. So there's 3 different parts to mirrors. There's tournament, which if you're not a resident of Japan, you can't take part of tournaments. But I will talk about that in a second. Ranked mirrors, where I can already tell you she's probably not going to get used. It's not impossible that she's going to get used, but probably won't get used in ranked mirrors. And thirdly, because ranked mirrors is all about getting to Magia, thirdly, doing regular endless mirrors, and I'm going to talk about the solo strategy. So, about tournament, quickly. She could actually see some use in tournament. First off, with both of her anti-debuff, actually we'll just take only one, you can ignore Meteor Rain. Like, Meteor Rain is used very often in basically every single ranked and tournament playstyle, and Meteor Rain first applies the attack down. The attack down gets blocked by the first anti-debuff, and then it applies the defense down. That gets blocked by the second anti-debuff. You ignore the first Meteor Rain that is cast on Ashley. That's pretty darn good. Secondly, with the damage cut and the blast damage up, it only lasts for 5 turns. You end in 5 turns anyway, usually 3 turns, so yeah, you don't care about that. You can't be bound, which is pretty good. And most importantly, the anti-evade and anti-provoke actually gives you a sort of X factor to hit against a Sudachi team and randomly snipe people out from Sudachi teams, which might like reduce the amount of points your enemy gets, and in tournament that's pretty important. So yeah, overall she seems like she could actually see some tournament use here and there. I don't know, depends on what happens next tournament, but yeah, she could maybe see some use there. The anti-evade is not actually quite that important, because if you're playing tournament, you probably have an MLB special seed, which already has anti-evade, so you don't really care about that. Moving on though to something that might be a lot more important to a lot of people out there. What if you do solo mirrors? If you want to do the solo mirror strategy where you just play Ashley Taylor as the only character on the field and you want to win in 1 turn, how good does that stack up against Yosuru? I think she's somewhere on the same level as Yosuru. However, I will say this: Yosuru doesn't have anti-evade and anti-provoke, especially anti-provoke, 100% as an active. Okay, there's another character I want to. So, by the way, just between these two, personally, I would pick Ashley for the anti-evade and anti-provoke. You don't even need special seed to do that. That's pretty good. But most importantly, I want to compare her to another character, the Rat, against the little Kyubey. So, I'm not going to go too deep into all of this, but just know that there are a bunch of differences between the two, and if you have both of them, if you have both Fossil Little Kyubey and both Fossil Ashley Taylor, which of the two is better in as a solo mirror strategy? I can't quite say that, but let me just quickly go over it. Ashley Taylor has about the same attack. She gets plus 9% Spirit Enhancement, Awakening, or just in general, plus 9% Awakening. Mokyu gets 8%, but Mokyu has like 200 attack more. They have about the same attack with all of that together, okay? They have about the same attack, so that doesn't really change. However, Ashley has plus 16% Blast, and Mokyu has plus 15% Blast. And with Ashley, you get a Puella Blast combo. A Puella Blast combo, every disc on that combo has about 30% more damage than if you have just a regular Puella combo that has blasts on it, which Kyubey has to do because Kyubey doesn't have 3 blast discs. So overall, already, you're dealing about 30% more damage than Kyubey just against a blank target, okay? However, that's not where the story ends. Here we have 40% blast up from Ashley. Kyubey has the active, Kyubey has a blast damage up passive, and Kyubey has an EX skill passive that gives another 10%. Overall, Kyubey has about 65% just passive damage up modifier on their turn, on turn 1. So Kyubey still has like 25% more modifier on there, which kind of evens out the damage a little bit. So with just those two things combined, they have about even damage, maybe Ashley slightly more. However, where it kind of does turn is the fact that Kyubey gets elemental advantage against everything, and including void types. So because Kyubey gets advantage against everything, there's another plus 50% damage against basically everything, meaning Kyubey just does more damage overall on every single disc. Maybe not the first disc, actually, maybe the same damage on the first disc as a blast disc from here. So if you keep all of that in mind, yeah, the rat probably has a little bit more damage, especially against every single type that isn't light type. Against light type, actually has more damage. So it's a kind of bit of a back and forth. Yeah, Ashley has more damage against light type, but worse damage against all the other types, where she gets a Blast Puella combo and all of that stuff. But what I think is the X factor that might want to make you consider, you have anti-evade and anti-provoke on the active. Meaning, if you don't have special seed, good job, you just now have an anti-evade. You don't have to worry about special seed or space suck anymore, awesome, you just have anti-evade. Secondly, you have the anti-provoke. With anti-provoke, you don't have to worry about tanks intercepting your hits anymore, that's great. However, because you do less damage, there might actually be some tanks that survive your hits, which sucks. With Mokyu, there's no way anyone, even the highest defense tanks with billions of damage cuts, survive a hit from Little Cube on your first turn. It's not possible. I've not seen a single tank that even got close to it. Even the most tankiest tanks that I've ever seen, I still did over 55,000 damage to. It's that you just can't survive this. Against Ashley, yeah, probably can survive that. So keep that in mind. But yeah, at least you don't get provoked out, but you can still get Guardianed. There's only one character in the entire game that has Guardian passive as part of Spear Enhancement, it's Momoko. Yeah, and there's some Memoria that do it. So you can still get Guardian, but you can play around that, I guess. So it's a toss-up. It's a toss-up with which of them is better. Mokyo has more damage, but doesn't get the Blast Puella combo. Against light types, Ashley is way better, but Ashley also has anti-evade and anti-provoke. But Little Cube has advantage against everything, so whatever. Anyway, I'm kind of done with Ashley so far. I didn't want to do this longer than 20 minutes, but there was so much stuff to talk about Ashley because she's a pretty crazy character. Not just in the fact that she has 4 blasters, but also in the stuff that she can actually do or the stuff that she can't do. Moving on though, we have some other stuff. There's some Memoria over here that basically, I'm basically going to give the same opinion that I gave back on NA. They're really good. There's some really good Memoria in here. But I wouldn't say that they're quite as game-breaking as they were on NA. I mean, they weren't game-breaking on NA either, they're just really strong. Keep on, there actually are slight differences between them. If I go forwards and back, and then back and then forwards, and then one step forward, you will actually see the stats are slightly different. They are a little bit better on the Japanese version. The art is slightly different. But overall, they're basically the same. Like, the effect is still the exact same. Blast damage up for 1 turn and defense down to all enemies for 1 turn. That's great. You can use this on Ashley to do a 1-turn burst, which is good. No use for mirrors, of course, because mirrors it has cooldown. And then you also have here a victory pose, which in here has got great success in the longed for land. Okay. Once again, stats are slightly different, a tiny bit better in the Japanese version, and the effect is the exact same. 25% attack power is great, and the bind is okay. The bind is not that important, but hey, the attack is really good, and sometimes the bind can be really useful, but sometimes it also does basically nothing. So it's a bit of a toss-up. But it's still a pretty good Memoria, So yeah, that was that. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Hit that subscribe button. And before I go, there's one more thing I need to tell you guys about. This might be the deal breaker or the deal maker for a bunch of people. I'm not quite sure about this. It depends on what your opinion is. She speaks Japanese now. She has Japanese quotes. You can't hear this because I mirror the audio, but she talks Japanese. She talks Japanese. You don't get her English. So no more Kumanosuke is ready and so am I. It's Japanese now. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hit the subscribe button, ring the bell, and I'll see you guys next time.